Hi everyone. So my name is Priyam Rajkua. I am a psychologist by profession and I am also a researcher. I'm currently working in Indian Institute of Science under Dr. Pradipta sir, and I am working in the Department of Center for Product Design and Manufacturing. So I do qualitative research. I will quickly start with an introduction of how qualitative research is, what it is about, and the general procedures and process that it involves. Okay. So, beginning that, what is qualitative research? Qualitative research is basically the study of all the highly complex and contingent phenomenon. Like, say, there are broader subject areas like studying the difficulties of nurses in a complex situation, or studying the painstaking of various labor class people, anything like that, or any kind of sensitive data that involves sensitive topic and phenomenon to be studied. We use qualitative research where the number of variables are way too high that can be handled by quantitative methods. So it involves collecting, analyzing, and interpretation of data by observing people, what they do, what they say. It also involves interviewing them. It also involves being part of it, of the entire culture, staying with them for certain amount of time, and then interacting with them in a lively way, and then proceeding with the analysis and interpretation of data. So basically, it refers to the meanings, the concepts, the definitions, characteristics, the various metaphors and the symbols that every individual has, the descriptions of things in a way that emphasizes the words and the meaning, the personal meaning of information, rather than just a quantification of the various processes on collection of data. So predominantly it emphasizes in an inductive approach where we study the relationship between theory and research in a way that it believes in the generation of theories. Like in quantitative studies, there is testing of hypothesis. In qualitative studies, it is mostly done to generate hypothesis. Qualitative studies has rejected the practices and the norms of the natural scientific model in a preference for an emphasis on the ways in which individuals interpret the social world. It is mostly the study of how people interact with various phenomena being part of in a social world. Like say if an individual is interpreting and interacting uh, with any kind of technology, it can be any kind of object, it can be interacting with other people, it can be studied in multiple contexts and dynamics in the context of their social world. It takes into account the social reality, which is the very dynamic process of how the various social reality is constantly shifting. So basically, it takes into concern the dynamic relationships between how people and various interrelationships that they have in the world, like that. So the strengths and weaknesses of the qualitative research is that when one wants to know and examine the feelings and motivations of people, why one is using an object, a technology, or any kind of thing, or if one wants to examine the various complexity and the deep issues that one faces of any phenomenon. It can be at the individual level, it can be at the societal level, or it can be at the group level, like at a bunch of people, like that. It also provides very great insights into real life. On the other hand, the weaknesses are it cannot be generalized into the whole population, so it depends on the sample size, and if it has to be generalized, then further studies has to be done. And the volume of data. So the volume of data produced by qualitative research is a lot. It involves a lot of processes of transcription, population group again, and then working on it. The analysis process is very complex, and it takes a lot of time. So unlike quantitative studies, there are set of rules where one can do descriptive studies, non-descriptive studies to test the hypothesis. So
I think the voice is gone.
now,
You were silent for a bit. Like I think there's a internet connection error.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So qualitative study or constructive interpretivism, which it takes into account that human beings' social reality is constantly changing, which is objective. So when one wants to study poverty, it's a relative concept. So similarly, like that, any kind of qualitative research is very relative. It is not absolute. So it takes into account, it believes in the fact that the researcher has to see the data from the eyes of the people, the phenomenon that is being studied. It has to emphasize on the content. The emphasis is also on the process. It is a very flexible process. So if any point of time review of literature can be done throughout the entire process, it has a very limited structure, and the concepts and the theory is grounded in data. So the strategy of basic qualitative research is that it focuses on the words. It uses an inductive relationship between theory and research. It has an interpretivism epistemology, and it also constructivism. So the basic process, I will run through it again. There are basic general research questions like the phenomenon that one wants to study. For example, it can be like how is the process of motivation involved in using XYZ technology? Then it is followed by selection of relevant sites and samples or population, followed by collection of relevant data. Then the data is interpreted. So the research questions can be modified over a period of time, and it can also be added on to the entire research. So, and then it is being followed by collection of further data. Finally, it involves writing various findings and conclusions. In qualitative research, it is very important to focus the relationship between theory and data. So the theory that is generated in qualitative research, it is actually extracted from the data. So this is the basic research process that is followed overall. So first of all, there are the ideas. The ideas are basically the research questions. It is being, and then literature review, which is basically it's so literature review builds up over a period of time till the write-up is done. So it's a constant process that is done throughout uh, in each research process. It is then followed by design, which is a plan that is followed in order to carry out the research. It involves things like the strategies for the selection of the samples, the inclusion criteria, the exclusion criteria, how the data collection samples will be included, the ethical considerations, taking permissions, all those things. Then it is followed by data collection, analysis, and dissemination. So data collection is at the organization phase, which is basically like in order to gather research, how can one collect data? So it involves interviews, it can include participant observation, semi-structured interviews like that. It is quite difficult to collect the data because it involves a large volume of data. Then it is followed by analysis, where the data is reduced to a simplified version that the raw data can be transformed into more manageable forms. After doing the data analysis, in the data analysis process, there is a data display where one can use storyboards, one can use personas, or one can use clippings, one can use storytelling ways to present the information, one can use various diagrams, memos, like that. Then conclusions and verifications, where once the data is being collected, in order to cross-check what is important, what is relevant, and if the data and the theory generated from the research, is it correct or not, in order to check that, there are different ways for it. Then comes dissemination, which means that one is actually writing the various inputs of the analysis. There's a detailed documentation of it. There are other researchers that goes through it, evaluates the analysis, and the test results are developed. So these are some of the various qualitative research techniques. There is observation, there is think aloud method, there are semi-structured interviews, focus group, diary studies, autoethnography, working with existing sources, grounded theory, action research, participant observation, contextual inquiry, ethnomethodology, theory-shaped study. These are just a few of the qualitative research techniques. I'll run through quickly some of the most used qualitative research techniques. First is observation. So observation is basically observing people working or carrying out their activities and interacting with technologies. Um, it's a direct way to observe people live to see how they are performing the various activities in practice. So it also involves interviews. So there are different kinds of ways how observation can be done. So there is covert participation, where the setting is very open. Then there is again, covert participation can be done in a closed setting. Then comes overt participation, and overt participation in an open setting. So covert setting participation is basically when a researcher does not reveal their role as a researcher. They are taking part in various observation studies, but they are not revealing to their sample subjects and participants that they are actually researchers. On the other hand, overt participation is when the researcher is openly stating that they are researchers and they want to study XYZ phenomenon. So some of the pros and cons of overt role and covert role. When one is doing covert studies, they need permissions. Sorry, they do not need permissions. Uh, People do not really react well to the researcher, since the role is very covert. There is problem of taking notes, recording data. So it's mostly a lot of spy work using webcams, then invasion of privacy. So ethically there comes a lot of difficulties, and getting permission to conduct covert role researches is also very difficult. It also creates necessary trustful relationships to the people being studied. On the other hand, for the overt role, one has to build trustful relationship with the participants who are being studied. Next comes the think aloud method, where the users or the participants are asked to think through the thoughts or tell aloud the thoughts when they're interacting with For this, it requires access to a system, and the data focuses on the system rather than the broader work context. Um, After that, it involves understanding how people perceive and experience a system and how they use it to support their work. For example, a researcher can ask a participant to use and to think about the method of using a ATM machine or a card swiping machine that has touch rather than the button system. Then comes unstructured interviews. So there are different kinds of interviews. There is structured interviews, there is semi-structured interviews, and there is unstructured interviews. So unstructured interviews are like conversations where the researchers and the participants are having free-flowing conversations. There is no time limit to it. The quality of conversation is basically on a lot of general topics, and the researcher has to they have to stick to the central issues that are being studied. Then comes semi-structured interviews. In majority of the industry and the academic um, field, semi-structured interviews are mostly used because of ethical clearance and also to get a flow of the various research topics that are to be covered. So So it can be done on groups or individuals. A schedule is booked in advance. A tentative list of questions are also prepared, but they have the flexibility of asking questions that are not present in the list of questions that they have prepared. There is deep exploration of participant thoughts and experiences, and often the sole data source is the study of the qualitative data. Then comes focus groups. In focus groups, one again studies the perceptions and experiences of people. These are basically done in groups of 3 to 4, and there are multiple groups. They can have 4 to 5 groups of 3 to 5 member each. This method is mostly used in marketing studies in order to test new products. The theme of the subject is explored in depth, and what is the agenda and what is the motivation of the study and the discussion is told to the group in advance so that the discussion can lead to fruitful feedback. So there is the interviewer, and there are also the interviewees. So there is free flowing of conversations happening. The moderator is there, where the interviewer has to, whenever there is going back from the topic, they have to come back to the topic, maintaining questionnaires. They have a exact number of questions. There is limited time limit to it. Um, what kind of language do they use? Is the language relevant to the people? Is it understandable to the people or not? Which is very important. So focus group studies and semi-structured interviews can be done on variety of phenomenons. It can focus on stories and humors, the various places and locales, contradictions, relationships, formal and informal roles, behavior, emotions, beliefs, and values. Next comes diary studies, where the users and the participants are asked to maintain a diary of relevant actions, experiences, or thoughts. It's a longitudinal method of data collection, and it's very specific to the context of use. So if one wants to study the usage of washing machine, a new kind of washing machine, then the subject is asked to maintain diary studies only for that. It cannot be replicated to other studies. Also, the diary has to be maintained throughout for a period of 1 week or 2 weeks, depending on the nature of the research question and the study duration of the plan. Depending on that, if the participants do not follow up in maintaining their diary, this method is not very useful. Then comes autoethnography, where the participants who are the researchers? They themselves are maintaining the role of intervention. They maintain a course of diary of actions. They note down, they memo their experiences, their reflections, which is it is a very subjective method, and the very less sample size, so it is not representative of the user population. It is very contextual again. Working with existing sources is basically like secondary research. So primary research methods are different and secondary research methods are different. Both of them can be qualitative. Uh, so working with existing sources, it involves understanding based on background material. So once the data was generated, it depends on the purpose and the audience, so that directly suited to the current research question, answers and interpretations can be generated. So it can use video, social media, it can use audio, it can use text, it can use various other methods of data as well. Theory-shaped research. So theory-shaped research is the design and of data gathering and analysis, which is informed and constrained by the selective theory. So there are different theories, and depending on which theory is to be explored or built up to add more modifications to it, to add more constructs to it, this method is mostly used for that. It can also be used for testing or extending a theory, gaining more insights to it. And it is useful so when certain information, because of contextual irrelevance at one point of time, was not taken into consideration, it can cover that. Next comes ethnomethodology. This is also known as ethnographic research, and Harold Garfinkel was he is a sociologist, and he practiced from Chicago School of University sociology department, and it's a very it's a method that is widely used in sociology in order to study how people behave in a culture at a societal level. So this method usually involves how people want to understand or make sense of whatever work that they are doing. It was mostly used during the industrialization period, where a lot of women started to work, going out, and they wanted to understand subjective experiences of the people. Then comes contextual inquiry. It involves preliminary analysis, which is shaped by the constructs and questions of the various information flow. It can include anything like, say, current artifacts, what are being used, what is not being used. It is mostly used in the area of UI and UX in order to understand what are the various technologies that are used or can be useful, the various motivations behind it, the pain points behind it, like that. And it is not suitable for mobile settings. Participant observation is more or less similar to observation, but here the researcher is more direct. There's a fine line of distinction between participant observation and observation. So here the researcher overtly participates in the roles. They get ethical clearance. They also understand, they record, they videotape everything. They have the permission to transcribe. They have the permission to go back to the same population size and cross-check the data for reliability and validity. So what does the researcher makes and uses of it? How is the process of participant observation? So the researcher observes the general observations of the behavior and of the members of that particular setting that is to be studied. It listens to and engages in conversations. There are also interviews that are being conducted. The observation is done about the various topics that the researcher is not clear about. There are a collection of documents about the group. So there is secondary research followed by primary research. And then a thick, detailed write-up is being followed. Then comes action research. It is again mostly used in the field of HCI and psychology when the researcher wants to study the application and the influence of a particular object or a phenomenon on the sample size life. So what is the effect of it on the participant's life is very important, and that is how it is evaluated and studied. So there is a planning done. So the action, basically the intervention is introduced, followed by interviewing processes, analysis, and then reflection, which is like how is it impacting it? What are the motivations behind usage of it? What are the difficulties? What feedback do they have? And it's a cyclic process. So basically a plan is made, and then the various agencies or stakeholders are identified. Then the plan is put into action. There is collection of data, there is questioning involved. It also uses observation. From that, the data is analyzed and the reporting is done. It is also shared with other researchers in order to ensure reliability and validity. The data is then reflected, and then after that, implementation and evaluation is done. So it's a cyclic process. So until and unless it is a clear solution is received, it's a very long process. Then comes grounded theory. So grounded theory again is a method that originated in sociology, and so the data is gathered from the information that is collected from the subjects. So it's a very constructivism perspective where it is assumed that every participant's life is subjective. It is not absolute, it is relative. They are prone to changes. It is prone to the dynamicity of various situations and contexts is studied. Theoretical sampling is being produced, which just means that once the concepts, similar concepts are received, only then collection of data and analysis of data is stopped. So the coding process of grounded theory involves reading through the data. So a transcript is made after the interviews are conducted. After the transcription is done, the data is read through it. The data is read again and again, and the keywords that stand out are marked, which are known as coding or codes. And then it's an iterative process. So this process is done over and over again. It can be done by one researcher, and also it can be done by multiple researchers. And then after that, theoretical saturation is tried to achieve. Constant comparison is used. There are different kinds of various other methods like cross-questioning, free flow method, free association method. Different other methods are also used in the grounded theory methodology. So this involves the subjects are, since they are open to any kind of interpretations, it is very important to cross-question and check if so the main aim of using grounded theory research method is in order to create a theory so that the data can be organized in a systematic and a meaningful way. So discourse analysis is basically how various languages is being used, in what contexts it is being used, what is the meaning behind the constructed languages, what can be done with the words, the various meanings and the truths of world in terms of contextualized analysis. So the use of language in situations in various background, in various contextual ways, contextual analysis is used, or discourse analysis is used. In this, so this is a product of, again, sociology, and the researchers are interested in understanding the various differences that lies in the research design in terms of what are the various problems, what are the various outlying cases, like that. Then comes surveys. So surveys can include qualitative research, which are basically like open-ended questions. So this is mostly used for population size that is spread across in a very geographically distributed way, when one wants to know the opinions and the motivations behind why a phenomenon is being taking place. So again, it involves, so there are different ways in order to how a survey can be conducted, different ways in order to how to make appropriate survey questionnaire, how to design a questionnaire, what kind of questions to include in it. So there are different ways of it. One can have open-ended questions, one can have closed-ended questions. What are the different ways of ordering the survey questions? Like mostly the least important questions or the demographic details are asked, followed by the most important questions, and the less relevant questions followed by that. Then subjective questions are asked towards the end, so that even if people do not want to express it or write it down, then they are open to not do it. Then comes conversation analysis. It is again a subtype or a method of ethnomethodology, which focuses on the practical common sense reasoning in everyday life situations in which people make the sense of reality in face-to-face interaction. It is based on intersubjectivity, which is at a very micro level. So the language is determined, the way, the tone, the pitch, what context is it, what kind of various problems is one facing, the informal characters that are being used in the conversation. Everything is analyzed in conversation analysis. So for this, this is a very long process. Detailed transcriptions are used and sophisticated coding system is used for this. Narrative analysis is again another form of analysis. It is mostly used in terms of when one is telling stories and one wants to make out information and analysis from the chronologically systems. So it's mostly used in hermeneutics, which is study of religious texts, religious beliefs, core structures of how one holds a particular belief about any system in that way. So I'm running through the process in general, like how analysis is done, or like how thematic analysis are done. So codes are being used. So codes are basically tags that categorize the data collected during a study in order to assign meanings to them. So in a transcript, when one has particular important meaning that stands out, they are assigned to codes. And then after that, they are carefully examined about the meaning of it. It reduces so it basically condenses the data, the raw data. It facilitates to make comparisons, to look for similarities and dissimilarities, to identify the various patterns that requires further investigation. And after that, once one achieves the codes, further questions in further new interviews can be asked. So from using this method, using the codes, one can also derive quantitative data from it. So these codes can be on the basis of themes, they can be on the basis of topics, ideas, concepts, terms, phrases, or any keywords that is found in the data. So the data here means the transcripts. One can also listen to the audio or video recordings if it's part of it. In order to do thematic analysis, there are softwares available like NVivo and Atlas TI. It's mostly used in large-scale data where when the number of interviews runs in 40, 50, like that. Then comes reliability and validity. So in quantitative study, there are different ways of verifying and measuring reliability and validity. Similarly, in qualitative research, there are different ways how reliability and validity can be measured. So these terms are mostly borrowed from the quantitative paradigm, and it is inclusive. It's a very inclusive trend so that the data can be verified and cross-checked. In quantitative studies, there is internal validity, there is external validity, there is reliability, and there is objectivity. On the other hand, in qualitative research, there is credibility, there is transferability, dependability, and conformability. So, credibility basically means that when the results are seen, it has to be believable by the participants in the research. So once the analysis is done, it has to be cross-checked with the participants, and the participants decide the credibility of the analysis as to in like how true or false is it. So there are different ways to measure credibility. It involves prolonged engagement, persistent observation, triangulation, peer debriefing, negative case analysis, referential adequacy, and member checking. Then comes transferability. So transferability exists when the results can be applied to other contexts. So say a study is being done in the area of visible disability. For like say example, blindness is a visible disability. On the other hand, there are a lot of invisible disabilities as well that are recognized by the WHO. So how the various test results or the findings can be of visible disability can be replicated and implicated in the area of invisible disability. So what is the transferability of the various themes and constructs is important. The researcher should also describe in detail the context and underlying assumptions of the research. So qualitative research involves, it's a very long process and it's very descriptive. So in order to understand in what are the other contexts it can be transferred, what population size it can be transferred, what sample size it can be chosen, it is very contextual. So with the help of the thick descriptions, transferability is possible. Then comes dependability. Dependability emphasizes on the stability of the data over time. So we understand that social science researchers and qualitative science research focuses on subjective reality or social reality, and the core phenomenon of it is dynamics and relativism. But in spite of that, how it can be studied? Say recession over a period of time, that constructs may change, but the core constructs will remain the same. So how dependable is it? The researcher must be able to account for the permanently changing contexts in which the research takes place, describing any changes that occurs and how these changes affect the research. So say one can study how the study of recession can be done in different geographical settings, and the researcher can have to be able to account for those changes in contexts. This is also known as progressive subjectivity. Then comes conformability. Conformability demonstrates that the inquiry is free of bias, values, and prejudice. A researcher has memories. They are human beings, and no matter how much of a possible they try, there might be subjective biases. There might be some certain personal values and prejudices involved. So it lies a very key responsibility over the researcher that as much as possible objectivity is obtained, which just means that when the data interpretations and outcomes are rooted in contexts and persons apart from the researcher and not just products of the researcher's imaginations. So the data should be representative, the analysis, the findings should be representative of what the participants said or what the participants felt. And it should not be a product of the various imaginations or subjective makeup of the researcher. It is important to know that the researcher must, they should document each process, each procedures. So in order to maintain documentation, there are transcripts, there are memos, there are diagrams, there are personal diaries where reflections, there are reflective diaries, there are journals that are personal journals where the researcher uses to maintain documentation that is involved in each and every tiny process of the research. So this documentation process helps to strengthen conformability, which also there are other ways of maintaining that, which is like prolonged engagement, persistent observation, which is basically like when there are multiple researchers, they can collectively work and cross-check each other's work in order to see if the researcher is prone to any biases and values, and it can be worked on. Negative case analysis, where one says when the data is in extremes, and triangulation. So Creswell has suggested there are different ways to ensure validity of it. Triangulation is one method for it. Member checking is another, where the participants are asked, the same participants or a different set of participants with the same inclusion and exclusion criteria are approached in the similar contexts, and the data is cross-checked with them in order to ensure that there is conformability. Maintaining rich and thick descriptions, avoidance of researcher biases to a very great extent. One may not be objective 100%, but one has to try to be objective as much as possible. Prolonged engagement, peer debriefing, and external auditing, where a researcher from another qualitative researcher is appointed in order to go through the entire research process and carefully scrutinize the processes that are being involved and suggest any recommendations that has to be done. Again, this is some other ways where researchers, qualitative researchers, can use to ensure reliability, which is maintaining, again, thick descriptions, detailed case study protocols, checking the transcripts for mistakes, appointing another researcher to go through the entire transcripts, to look into the codes, to look into the entire methodology of it, to coordinate the communication among coders. So there can be one coder, there can be multiple coders as well. The transcript can be coded using softwares. It can also be coded manually. Cross-checking the codes that are developed by different researchers.
Present two case studies on developing new interactive technologies for automotive user interface domain. The first case study will investigate a wearable laser pointer tracker based interactive device to operate car dashboard in head down display configuration. And the second case study will look at an eye gaze and finger movement control interactive head-up display, also in automotive user interface domain.
Press an icon on dashboard. Okay. stop music. You now close your eyes. Okay, okay. Music. Look away. Look back. Okay, now close your eyes. Okay, open. Wind control. Okay. So will that be done? Press commit. Yeah. Stop.
Yeah, straight on the right.
Take the focus out and then show that Aparna is not using any other device. She is using only her eyes. Okay. No, don't stop. Okay, commit.
Right. So I'll begin with, so I studied driver acceptance. Let's begin with what is driver acceptance. It is basically the intention to use the system, incorporating of the system into driving, subjective evaluation of the system, continuous, it is very continuous in nature, realizing the potential effects of the system and the gains of using the system, where the subject or the professional driver sees it at the best. The objective of the study was to explore and understand the various processes of technology acceptance in the prototype stage of product life cycle, the feelings and the feedback of the end users. So in this case, it was professional drivers. It could be understood so that the product in the prototype stage of development can be the changes that are suggested by the professional drivers can be incorporated into the design. So it was proceeded by basically starting with a review of literature, which was then followed by selection of certain constructs, making the interview guide that included the various constructs that were selected from the review of literature. Then we conducted semi-structured interviews where the questions that was already prepared was asked, along with that other questions that came up during the interview processes was also cross-checked and re-asked and clarified. It was then followed by analysis and then theory development. Um, the basic findings from heads down display that we found was that uh, heads down display was really liked by the participants, the professional drivers. They were amazed and awed by the aesthetics and the way laser pointer was used. They found that it is very easy to use. They recognized the system as very useful, and also it was very easily learned by the drivers. So the drivers, being the education qualification of each driver's maximum being class 8 9, uh, complexity of learning any new product is very difficult. It acts as a repulsive to for any human being. So since this laser pointer edged heads down display was easy to learn, the drivers really liked it. The professional drivers feel that the HDD is going to prevent damages. It's also going to prevent the customers from accessing the unsubscribed services like air conditioning services that they have not paid for. Expenditure on maintenance cost is also going to be reduced, as the maintenance cost has to be paid by the professional drivers themselves. Uh, Using HDD was felt safe as they were familiar with the concept of laser. They made less mistakes, and the fear of using laser pointer was negligent. Um, the preferred amount of expenses or expected budget by the professional drivers to invest in the HDD system is 10,000, and in order to purchase any kind of new technology and gadgets, the professional drivers take advices from accessory shops, local garages, service centers, and family members. It was very fascinating for us to know that they do not rely on internet, or they do not rely on ads in of cars, or newspaper ads, print media ads like that. It's mostly the word of mouth advertising techniques and marketing techniques that works for them. Furthermore, insights from the heads-down display study is that the heads-down display was found and perceived to be a more durable product as compared to touch. So we did not have a question regarding comparison between touch and heads-down display, but the participants themselves came up and said that the system is far more better than touch, as the chances of getting spoiled and any kind of damage prevention is much better, and also this system is in control of our hands, so that way it's going to prevent a lot of actions, any kind of accidents. It's going to prevent um, expenditures in maintenance cost, all those things. Also, the chances of committing errors in touch is high, as more finger space is required. Because of that, in critical situations while picking up and dropping uh, customers, when the drivers have to coordinate with multiple things, so there are multiple checklists that they have to do, the professional drivers have to do, like looking for a landmark, coordinating over call with the customer, looking for maps. So in that situation, the cognitive load of the drivers is at the peak, and they do not want to add on to any trouble, and majority of the time the trouble to them is caused by touch. When something else is being pressed instead of something else, the touch stops working, it starts hanging. So because of that, the chances of committing error and the fear of committing error is very high. So the professional drivers felt that HDD is going to reduce uh, fear of committing error. It also gives a better driving experience for the professional drivers. So these are certain findings from the heads-up display. It uses eye tracking technology as the info as the infotainment system primarily. The drivers felt that the ability to move in the driving seat in order to use the system plays a vital and important role. Uh, they also felt that the subjective risk or perceived risk would be much higher in traffic if there is no quick and accurate icon selection. They were familiar with the new technology, as all of them witnessed major technology changes and shifts in the infotainment systems of the vehicle, starting from cassettes to VCD to DVDs to CDs to pen drive, Bluetooth, and now internet. So they are very confident that any new technology they will be able to adapt pretty quickly. They felt that the heads-up display should be inbuilt. This came up when they asked what would be the setup cost of uh, heads-up display. So taking into consideration the socio-economic conditions and the budget, expected budget and stuff, they prefer that the heads-up display should be inbuilt. Uh, they found it was found that the advices and the suggestions about purchase of any new technology and gadgets was actually taken from accessory shops, local garages, service centers, and family members. From heads-up display, it was found that since the display would be on the windshield, the drivers felt that it's going to compete for their concentration on the road and the windshield. So that way, they felt that it's going to increase the risk of accidents. And it was a very good feedback for us, because that way they suggested that if the display can be turned off on the windshield whenever not required, it's going to be really good. It was also found that it was very easy, it was very comfortable, and learning the new technology was in a very short span of time. Uh, they expected that the device is more quick and swift, taking into consideration the traffic and customer safety. They felt that the system should be on the right hand side, as majority of the drivers, professional drivers, are right-handers, and that way it is easier for them not just to operate the system but also in terms of visual perceptions. Doing that, it will help them to meet the expectations of the customers in heavy traffic, alongside performing secondary tasks like contributed to risk of prevention of accidents and satisfaction of customers. In the heads-up display, it was found that scanning of the eyes took quite some time, and it was found to be uncomfortable, as the system requires the users in very quick and critical situations for the drivers. Yeah, that's the end of it.